if SpaceX were a country, it would be number one, far ahead of China. China is number two with 88. If they could use the aircraft only one time, as they do it with rockets usually, I would have to pay for a ticket $700,000. And then he should claim ownership and then to bring it to the stock exchange as a real estate investment trust so that everyone can own a piece of Mars. Most people don't understand how much we rely even today. And I think it will be much more if they have these data centers in space, for example. So I think it's the next really big story, maybe even bigger than AI.
Welcome to The Big Skinny with Lou Bassanese, where we focus on everything with one headline, one chart, and one insight you can use to take away to increase your bottom line, whether it's your health or your wealth, in every episode. And today, it is my pleasure to be joined by not one, but a double doctor, Dr. Rainer Zitelmann, author of over 30 books, and the newest of which, New Space Capitalism, just hit stores recently. Welcome to The Big Skinny.
Thank you.
Well, listen, SpaceX is the IPO of the year of forever. I mean, the biggest one, and a lot of headlines out there calling this maybe a bubble. You wrote a piece not too long ago is before you dismiss Elon Musk, remember the Wright brothers. So what's your overall take on the significance of this IPO in relation to your philosophy on the new space economy?
Yes. A few years ago, when I started to write about new space capitalism and publish articles about it, then my book, people laughed at me. This is a totally niche topic and it's totally irrelevant. What are you talking about? Space capitalism sounds crazy. But then my book is published now 3 days before the biggest IPO in history. So I feel in a way
laughing now, right?
Vindicated or so. Yes, I laugh now because I was right. Yes, and of course now the share price came back, I think like 30% if you compare it with the highs. But yes, maybe it's exaggerated. It happens always, but you have to distinguish between two kind of bubbles. The one kind of bubble, you call it the tulip bubble, as it happened some 100 years ago in the Netherlands. This has no real background. If the bubble bursts, is nothing left. The other kind of bubble is what happened in the end of the 90s with the so-called new economy bubble. And I remember this time after this bubble burst in the beginning of 2000, everyone said, internet, it was only, a fashion and it's like tulips and it's gone. Today, we know this was wrong. We have all this Google, Amazon, and all this, the biggest companies, they have their origin there. And I think with the space companies, they belong to the second type as we had it with the internet. So
do you think, though, the valuation's a little ahead of itself? Because you've done the research on this. How many companies are competing in the space industry right now, this new space economy, and how many survive, do you think?
Yes, I think this is not different from all other industries. That most startups, I think 80% fail after a few years, and I think there's no difference between the space companies and every other company. But you have a lot of great companies, not only SpaceX, for example. Rocket Lab is another one. They had 21 launches last year with 100% success rate. Of course, if you compare it with SpaceX, they had 165 launches. It may seem not so much, but if you compare it with Europe, whole Europe had 8 launches last year. 8.
So SpaceX is on an order of magnitude much bigger than the entire region of Europe, continent of Europe, in terms of space economy.
20 times more, but even more than all other companies, space companies in the world, because last year we had 324 launches worldwide. 165 out of them were SpaceX.
So it's 50%?
Yes, it's more than 50%. And it means if SpaceX were a country, it would be number one, far ahead of China. China is number 2 with 88. And if it is about the payload, it's 80%. It's even 80%. And another number of satellites. Today we have 15,000 active satellites in space. 10,000 out of them are Starlink satellites. So
didn't SpaceX put out news? We were talking about this last night about plans for another 1 million Starlink satellites, which would make them by far and away the dominant player in that world.
Yes, because the next plan is data centers in space. It has some advantage, for example, with solar energy. You have no day and night. You have no clouds, and then you can cool it. And so it sounds, of course, maybe more simple as it is in reality.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of companies working on this, like another company, Planet Labs, for example, NVIDIA works on this, Google, they're working on this data centers in Earth. This will be the next story. And then the other stories where today it's more than in the future, but also important, is asteroid mining, for example. It's space tourism. And then even you have it in the IPO prospectus, Musk's goal, settling Moon and Mars. This sounds like science fiction, but I think it will become reality.
Yeah, you said last time we had this comment, you said that SpaceX's S1 filing was irrelevant because they didn't really spend much time. It was written by lawyers and not the visionary Musk about asteroid mining and really how big the market could be for Mars. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Okay. Yes, exactly. Forget all the numbers in the IPO prospectus. What they are doing today is totally irrelevant for the future. Forget it. It's written by lawyers and it's about liability and all this. And there's only from this almost 400 pages I read it. It's not half a page about topics. It's only mentioned like future asteroid mining or space tourism. But these are great topics. For example, we have more than 1 million asteroids between Mars and Jupiter, and we have 40,000 near-Earth asteroids that can be dangerous in a way, but also with a lot of opportunities. We have, for example, PGM group, it means platinum group. Some asteroids, if you add the worth only of the platinum, it's more than the cross product of the whole world in 1 year. Of course, only in theory.
On a single asteroid?
Yes, only a single asteroid. Of course, only in theory. If you would bring them to Earth, platinum prices would plummet. And so this is a story. Then space tourism, of course, today it's very, very expensive. There's the cheap version for $300,000 to be spent some minutes, and the more expensive version, like $50 million, only for a billionaire. But in the first years of aviation, it was similar. It was only for super rich people. Even with cars, before Henry Ford, only the very rich, super rich could afford a car.
So you think that gets democratized over time? Space tourism becomes a very real thing?
Absolutely.
And I think this was a key point that you made that really resonated with me, is how dramatically SpaceX changes the economics because of the reusable rocket, right? And use this analogy about the plane. Let's use this about flying back home for you, because I think it's perfect.
Yes. I will fly back from New York to Berlin. And if they could use the aircraft only one time, as they do it with rockets usually, I would have to pay for a ticket $700,000. $700,000 if they throw it away.
You wouldn't be here right now, most likely.
No, if they throw it away. And this is how they produce rockets. Even NASA, with their last rocket, with this Artemis 2 mission, it cost $4 billion, but it was only one-time use.
Right.
And with Elon Musk, he used the same rocket today 36 times, and he will use it much more. And of course, it makes a huge difference in the costs. He reduced the launch costs. So it means how much does it cost to bring 1 kilo to space? If you compare it with a space shuttle, by 95%.
Wow.
95%. And he says, this is only the beginning. From this point on, I will reduce it by even, again, 90%.
And you said, too, in our previous conversation, he has a structural advantage because his model is not like the government contractor that was cost plus. This is a profit-driven opportunity, which you say is key in your book. The private companies are really important in the United States to make sure we outpace and outclass China. So can you get into that a little bit?
Yes, if you compare how NASA worked in the past with its companies, they built the rockets, they sold them the rocket, and this was on the basis of a cost plus contract. So the company told them, okay, we had the cost was 1 billion, and then they could add maybe 10% profit, but this means the more cost, the more profit.
Right.
Make 1 billion cost, 10%, 100 million profit. 3 billion is even better. Yeah. You have 300. Of course, this is a crazy system. And I spoke with someone who worked for one of the largest companies at this time, and he said, our best product was our overhead. And it must work in a totally different way.
Yeah.
He works like FedEx or UPS. I bring you something from A to B, and then I charge you a fixed price. For example, I bring you satellite in orbit, or I bring your astronauts to the International Space Station, and I charge you a fixed amount. And if he saves costs, it means increasing his profit. And you see, it's exactly the opposite. In the past, it was increasing costs, increasing profit. Today, decreasing costs means increasing profit. And this was the reason why he could, and he has a motive. And I think this is very important. This is another point, very important in my book. It's about the incentives. Yeah. And, people do only things when they have a reason, every one of us. And if it costs a lot of money, you have to be a very strong reason. And the reason for investing in space from the government in the 60s was the Cold War. Yeah. The first space race between the Soviet Union and the United States. Lyndon B. Johnson put it this way: who's first in space is first everywhere, who's second in space is second everywhere. So they invested so much money. It was almost 5% of the national budget. It was 400,000 people worked for the program, 20,000 companies. This was like wartime mobilization. Yeah. But you can't do it in the long run. And then the problem was, in the moment they planted a flag on the moon, the wind was out of the sail. There was no reason to do it. No incentive at that point. And this was the reason for decades and decades of stagnation. And I think to make it real that the story will become a new drive, you need one thing that is still missing today. This is private property in space. Because I have to explain it. We have one problem on the one hand, or maybe it's not only, it's also a chance. There's an outer space treaty from 1967 signed by almost all countries. And according to Article 2 of this treaty, it's prohibited for countries to claim ownership over celestial bodies or land of celestial bodies. So this is
from 1967.
It's from 1967. But there's nothing in this treaty about how is it with private people, how is it with companies. Because at this time, of course, in the 60s, no one could imagine that decades later there will be Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, billionaires or trillionaire who have the money and are willing to take the risk. So there's nothing. And there's a dispute among space lawyers whether it's also prohibited for companies or whether it's allowed. It's not clear.
It's not clear.
There's a legal dispute. And I think it should be allowed. For example, if SpaceX is able to reach Mars, what is his plan?
Is that still a first to Mars, first in everything, though? Do you think Mars is that significant?
I think Mars is very, very important. Asteroids also, but Mars is very important. And if they are there, they should claim ownership, not the whole planet, but maybe a manageable area. Let's say the size of Singapore, for example. The Mars surface
I'm laughing because Singapore is a pretty big area. I mean, I don't know what the population...
But Mars is 200,000 times bigger than Singapore. 200. So there's enough for others, 200 times more. So maybe Singapore or whatever, say Manhattan or whatever. And then he should claim ownership. And then to bring it to the stock exchange as a real estate investment trust so that everyone can own a piece of Mars. You, me, everyone who buys. That's my idea in the book, because it's the question, where should the money come from? You can't pay it with taxpayers' money. Right. It's not possible. And Musk had this plan to settle 1 million people on Mars. Okay, for some, it sounds like science fiction, but whether it's a million or 1,000 or whatever, I think without private property, it won't work.
It's not possible.
Economic systems without property failed without any exceptions in the last 100 years. They tried it so many ways, Soviet Union, Cuba, North Korea. And why should something work on Mars that didn't work in Korea or in Cuba? This is ridiculous. So you have to have private property. And of course, there's this legal uncertainty, but I think it will happen in a similar way as it was in the history, for example, of the United States. First, there were the settlers and the squatters. They took the land. They didn't ask anyone.
They just took it.
There was no lawyer, no police. They settled there. They took it. And later on, it was legalized by the Homestead Act, for example.
Yep.
And I think it will happen exactly in the same way. He will claim ownership, and then there will be a dispute, and later on, sooner or later, they will legalize it.
So have you spoken to Elon to come up with this idea where he should just claim ownership and you'll be help be his backer, marketing arm for the Mars REIT?
I really want it, but I have close contact with people very close to him, friends, but so far I had not the opportunity. But here, Elon Musk, if you hear this interview, I want to build with you a working group about the space REITs, because I was consultant to explain this for one of the most important real estate investors in New York for 15 years. This company is Jamestown. They owned Rockefeller Center, One Times Square, Chelsea Market, and a lot of
so
buildings.
You know a thing or two about the real estate market.
I know a lot. I was 20 years, so I'm a rare mixture historian, economic historian on the one hand, and real estate expert on the other. And I would love to build a team with Elon Musk, some lawyers, and some real estate experts about this vision, bring Mars to the stock exchange.
I love it. It's a great idea. There's your investment insight. Look out for it. We may have a Mars REIT before long. Let's talk about, just get back to SpaceX's dominance. I look in their S1 filing, they talk about the total addressable market at almost $30 trillion right now. Do you think that is an undervaluing the potential for the space economy over time?
It depends what you mean in the long run, whether it's the next years or the next 10 years.
Okay.
I think it will be one of the biggest industries. And even today, what a lot of people don't know, you can try it with ask your AI or ChatGPT, what would happen if from one day to the next, all satellites fail? I think nothing would work. You can't order Uber, even on the stock exchange, nothing would work. I can fly. And most people don't understand how much we rely even today.
Already.
And I think it will be much more if they have these data centers in space, for example. So I think it's the next really big story, maybe even bigger than AI.
Okay, bigger than AI. I love that. But then it becomes a national defense, national security story as well, right? If everything is relying on satellites now, fast forward 10, 20 years from now, it's going to be even more so. So it's imperative that we beat China to the punch. How does that happen? You talk about it. You're a historian, a sociologist as well. You studied capitalism, socialism, private versus public funding. How does it happen effectively where we beat China?
Yes, this is a really big problem. It's good that we talk about it. I have a chapter about China in my book. So if it comes to space, forget Europe. Yes, they're very proud that they have a gender equality certificate. So and we Germans are very proud that they have a special program how to bring disabled people in a wheelchair to space, but they have no rocket to do it. So forget Europe for a moment. It's all government-led and kind of crazy. And also forget Russia. They have other issues today. No, it's about the United States and China. Yeah. And we can't beat China on the basis of kind of government-led, because they are better with this. But even they realized that it can't be done only with government-led. Even Xi Jinping, who unfortunately brought China back to more government and less market. I admire very much Deng Xiaoping, who started in the 80s with his free market reforms, and this was great for China. But Xi Jinping goes, in my opinion, the wrong way, more going government, less market. Yeah. But even he understood that in space, it will be not possible only with government agents. So he allowed 12 years ago private companies, and today you have 450 private space companies in China.
In China alone?
Yes, in China, only in China alone. And of course, they try to copy, like they admire SpaceX, every single word that Musk says and every start. I know now they will be curious about the next Starship start. So first they copy it, and sometimes we made the mistake in the West to laugh at them. Oh, they copy everything. Right. But think about one thing. I'm coming from Germany, as you see, with my strong accent.
I didn't notice you had an accent.
So, and you see, they laughed about China with the automotive industry, because we were so proud about our Mercedes, BMW, and Volkswagen. Today, no one laughs about China. They laugh about us. And so, first they copy, but then they innovate, and then they become stronger.
That's
and
a great point.
I think, for the United States, it's very important. I think this issue of private property is so important because if China goes there first through Mars, of course, yes, they signed this outer space treaty, but you can cancel it with
there's no
1
reason
year
you can't
notice.
opt out of it, right?
Yes, and then they say, okay, the Mars belongs now to People's Republic of China or whatever. So we should really, really hurry to go there.
That's amazing. So some of the other things too want to talk about is just your test tube theory about socialism and capitalism, because I think that's really relevant nowadays with the rise of the democratic socialists of America. We're dealing that with on our own borders here. What have you found through all your studies, 2 doctoral studies, in terms of, you wrote The Case for Capitalism. What's really important to understand here? Yes,
first, what a lot of people don't know, in the last 200 years, the number of people living in poverty declined from 90% to 10%. So from 90% and this is because of capitalism. So if socialists say capitalism is responsible for hunger and poverty, exactly the opposite is true, because in the last 100 years, we had more than 25 socialist experiments and they failed without any exception. I remember the last, it's not long ago, with Venezuela, for example. In the end of the 1990s, the intellectuals in Europe, in the United States, they were so enthusiastic about, they called it the socialism of the 21st century. And so Hugo Chavez, it was the hero. What happened in the meantime? 1/3 of the population fled, 8 million. It's more than people that fled from Ukraine because they forget to build a wall. We know in German, socialism works only when you build a wall. Because otherwise people, so they forgot it. They should have studied the German experience. So, and the rest of the people living there in Venezuela, 80% live in poverty. And remember, in 1970, Venezuela was the richest country in Latin America and one of the 20 richest countries in the world. So it's dangerous. It can happen everywhere. If it can happen in Venezuela, of course, it can happen. Think about Argentina. Argentina was 100 years ago one of the richest countries in the world, as the United States. And then there was 100 years of decline, 100 years of, so it can happen everywhere. And
then Vietnam's the other example, the other side, right? Because 80% poverty and they started implementing some more capitalistic policies, and what happened?
Exactly. A very good example. They call themselves socialists, but don't believe it. I've been there several times. I produced a movie, Vietnam Beating Poverty with Market Economy. They even invited me for a lecture at the Foreign Trade University in Hanoi. The topic was, how can we improve the image of wealthy people? Yes, and I think it's
You've never got one of those invites in the United States.
No. It's easier to find a Marxist at Harvard University or any university in Europe and the United States than in Vietnam, because they learned their lesson. And yes, it's true what you said. In 1990, Vietnam was the poorest country in the world, poorer than all African countries, because they had the war not only with the United States, they had the war with China, with Japan, with France, with the United States. And what was not destroyed by the war was destroyed by the planned economy. And so they were the poorest country. And then they started with free market reforms in the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s. And the number of people living in poverty declined from 80% to 3% today.
80 to 3.
From 80 to 3. And so you see, this is what I call this like a test tube, yes, with 2 ingredients, market and state, or capitalism and socialism. And then as a historian, I look, what happens if you add more market,
more capitalist policies,
as in Vietnam, for example, or what happens if you add more government, more state, as it happened in Venezuela. Or another example is my country, Germany. We have now 7 years of stagnation, and because of an ideology-driven policy, everything with a priority fight against climate change. But even this was inconsistent, because if you believe in climate change being the biggest threat, you should have more nuclear power plants instead of less. But they phased out nuclear power plants.
Completely.
Then they phased out coal power plants. Then they forbid fracking, and we want to do always sun and wind. And now it's so expensive that companies move away. For example, one of the biggest chemical companies, BASF.
My dad used to work for them.
Yes, they moved now with a factory to China because they said it's cheaper, it's less bureaucracy than in Germany, even in China. And so this is a perfect example. And the problem is, when I had this discussion with people in Germany, and they say, oh, we have to fight against climate change, we have to do all this. Okay, but think about one thing. We are only responsible for 1.5% of CO2 emissions worldwide. Even if you made Germany totally 100%. Clean as you want, it's changed.
Well, this has always been my argument. The entire world, ex-China, could do everything perfectly, and then it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant.
But you know what was their counter-argument? That yes, maybe, but we become the role model for the rest of the world and everyone will copy us. And now I said, yes, exactly the opposite happened. Now everything looks at Germany, don't do it this way. Now, you know, and this is a lesson also for the United States. Don't do it the German way. It will fail.
It is. And we learned it in Texas because Texas actually under a Republican governor allowed a lot more renewables, paved the way. So Rick Perry, and they went to 42% renewables for electricity generation. And you had almost total failures through some extremes in weather. So we've started to learn that, but it seems like we go back to those lessons. So your point on the test tube is even a little bit of capitalism, more market, less state and government can have a profound impact.
Absolutely. No, some people dream about pure capitalism or others pure socialism. I don't believe in it. In reality, you have everywhere mixed systems. And today, almost everywhere I see, I know not a single country where we have too much market. So I see a lot of countries where we have too much government. But this is the great thing with capitalism is that even some drops of capitalism helps a lot. You have nowhere pure capitalism, but you have some countries that are more capitalist than others. There's this index of economic freedom by the Heritage Foundation. You can get it for free on the internet. And, you know, at the top, there are countries, most economic free countries like Switzerland or Singapore. And at the bottom is Venezuela, Cuba, and North Korea. And this brings me to something. I read this book by Bernie Sanders and heard his slogan, we shouldn't have any billionaires. Yes, but you know, if you look at the Forbes list, you know, for the richest people in the world, there's also a list how many billionaires are in each country. And there are some countries without billionaires, according to this list. This is Cuba, this is North Korea, and a lot of very poor African countries without billionaires. And then there are other countries with a lot of billionaires. Most people don't know it. Sweden is a country with more billionaires than the United States, adjusted to the population, and it's more capitalist than the United States. I produced a film, What Sweden Got Right. I recently, 2 days ago, I got an award for Best International Short Movie on the film festival. And this, you can see it in the film, What Sweden Got Right, because there are so many billionaires and they had their socialist time in the 60s and the 70s and it failed 100%. And so our Switzerland has a lot of billionaires. And so the only question I want to ask Bernie Sanders, would you prefer to live in North Korea, Cuba, or these poor African countries, or would you prefer to live in Sweden or Switzerland? But I think he knows nothing about Sweden because he told us that Sweden is a kind of socialist country. Yes, this was true in the 70s.
Right,
you should read some textbook about economy or history.
Yeah, listen, in our conversation alone, you've talked about being an author, well-published, over 32 books and counting, a filmmaker, a great public relations individual, great marketer, a real estate investor. I also find out you have the nickname, the Big Bicep of Capitalism.
That's true.
I love it. You got to carry the torch. What else is on your radar? Could you come do a traveling lecture series through American campuses and colleges to educate them on the positivity and the positive impacts of capitalism?
I would love it.
What's missing, right? Is there an ignorance of the impact of capitalism that's perpetuating through
one big
institutions?
Problem is that people know almost nothing about history. You know, I'm an historian. This is a big problem. I traveled in 2020, 22 and 23 through more than 30 countries all over the world. I had lectured there in Asia and Latin America and everywhere. And I asked every time when I had a lecture, my audience, one single question: have you heard about the biggest socialist experiment in history? This was Mao Zedong's so-called Great Leap Forward from 1958 to 1962. By the way, who haven't heard about it, I have a book, The Power of Capitalism, and the first chapter in The Power of Capitalism is about this. So 45 million people died. 45 million people. And wherever I asked, whether it was in Chile or in Brazil, or whether it was in Korea, or I've been in 16 European countries, and whether I spoke to 30 people, 300 or 3,000, only very few people raised their hand. They haven't heard about it. They know nothing about it. It's only the theory that socialism is good. But so this is my mission. So as an historian, because I studied history, and I wanted, it's not anything about ideology. It's about history, about facts that people should know.
Yeah. No, I think it's very important. I think that's what's lacking and missing. I do want to talk and touch about, in relation to the space economy, longevity, right? Because it becomes more important as we look at conquering extraterrestrial habitations. I noticed you might be a vegetarian. We got some of your favorite juice today, carrot juice. Do you think there's a connection? You're a very studied man. So did you make a conscious decision on your diet to extend life, and what was behind that?
No, this was not the reason, because my mother was vegetarian, but she cooked for us meat and everything. So I liked it, because she was not like, oh, don't eat it and so it's bad. Yes. Like Adolf Hitler, you know that he was a vegetarian?
No.
Yeah, he was a vegetarian, and he did it when people ate, think about the animals and so. No, my mother was not like this. By the way, she's still alive, very healthy with 93 years and writing me WhatsApp messages and so. But I don't think that it's because she's a vegetarian. No, this was not the reason. She feels with the animals, and I love to eat beef and chicken and fish and all this. But it happened from one day to the other that I ate something. Then these pictures came in my mind of how animals were killed. I think it was because of my mother's influence. Your
mom played the ultimate long game.
Yes, the long game. It teaches you something. Sometimes it's more effective than to do it with a hammer. Don't do this. So in the long term, and so it was not a conscious decision. It was more like I couldn't go on eating because these pictures came. So I hate it. I want to eat it. I liked, sometimes I eat every day chicken. So and then I couldn't do it anymore.
Oh, that's why. So, if you haven't noticed, we're all about all filling, zero fluff, and so is our email newsletter, where we deliver insights, one headline that you should probably ignore, one chart you should absolutely pay attention to, and one investment idea that you should follow to increase your bottom line right alongside ours. So if you're not signed up yet, go to thebigskinny.com, sign up for our newsletter. If you can't be bothered to give up your email address, that's okay. Give us a follow on Twitter or on YouTube so you never miss another episode. Two more questions before I let you go here. I know we got time constraints. Is just, how do we factor in humanoid robots into the whole space economy? Are they key enablers of building the infrastructure? I mean, is that really part of the thesis that this works out because we can?
Absolutely. Robots are absolutely essential, because for them it's much easier, of course, to live on Mars. You have no oxygen there on Mars. You have dangerous radiation. For these robots, it's not a problem at all. For us, it's a problem. So I wrote a science fiction novel. The title is 2075, When Beauty Became a Crime. And there are 2 cities on Mars, and there are 10 times more robots than men living there. But I think in reality, it will maybe 100 times more robots than men who live there, because it's much easier for them. They can work 24 hours. They need no rest and nothing. No problem with radiation, with missing oxygen and nothing. So yes, but I think also we should settle humans there, people there, but of course most of them will be robots. Absolutely.
Yeah. So Elon Musk truly has a monopoly on this, because he's already building Tesla to facilitate. He's repurposing automobile factories for humanoid robot production. He's got the rockets to get into space. And
even in space, he has a monopoly today. But I don't care about it. Of course, some people will be, it's a monopoly and we should do something. I think this is come to break it, and so like they do it with. I don't believe in it, because monopolies, according to the economic theory of Schumpeter, they have a worth for a period, because then you have the possibility to make some extra surplus profit, what is important to develop things like the Starship. But in the long run, there is no monopoly. Remember or think about Kodak. They had 85% market share.
Yeah.
And then they underestimate the shift to the digital cameras.
And they had the first patent on a digital camera, and they let it die.
Or for example, Xerox.
Yeah.
They had also 90% market share. I think today it's 2% or something like. And so it was always in history. I remember a Forbes magazine headline in 2007, Nokia, who will ever catch the cell phone kick?
Yeah,
who has Nokia today? Or
where's
another headline
right?
in The Guardian, who will ever someone break the monopoly of MySpace? If I have a lecture at MySpace, young people, I don't know. I never heard about it.
It's like a pay telephone. They have no clue.
Even with Google, 3 years ago, everyone said, oh, but Google, this is different this time. This have a monopoly. And in my last lecture, I asked people, so if you search for something, who use Google? Half of them raise hand. And who use other, like ChatGPT? No, not this. Like with artificial intelligence. We use this to, if you search something, sometimes I use Google, but in more cases, I asked, and I think this is a great thing with capitalism. Innovation, competition will break every monopoly. The only really bad monopoly is the state monopoly.
Yes.
And what I don't understand, that some socialists, you discuss with them, we are so afraid, this is so bad monopoly. Half hour later, they vote for state monopoly to nationalize everything. So this is a contradiction for me. I think the biggest enemy of monopolies is not the government, it's not antitrust politics, it's innovation, it's competition, and this will break every monopoly, also SpaceX monopoly.
You're preaching to the choir here. I've always been an advocate for more innovation. Last question. What's the next book that you're writing? Now we got 31 nonfiction, 1 fiction. What's the 33rd?
It's already written in Germany and the English translation is ready. I'm looking for a publisher now. It's Zero-Sum Mindset. You know, zero-sum means some people believe that rich people became only rich because they took it away from the poor. What is wrong? I prove it in this book. But not only anti-capitalists, also, Donald Trump is a zero-sum thinker because he believes that trade is zero-sum. You know, it's China or we, and I don't believe in it. So it's a book against zero-sum, and I'm very proud. Steve Forbes wrote the preface for this book, and now I'm looking for I'm talking with publisher, and this will be my next book.
So 2 timely actions possible for our audience here. Find us a publisher for your next book, and Elon Musk. We need a Mars REIT, and we need this man to partner with you.
Whoever has close contact to Elon Musk, I know some people, but of course he's very busy. Of course, I would like to meet him and talk about this Mars REIT idea.
Listen, I would love to talk to you on your next book once you decide to publish it. Thank you again. A pleasure.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure to talk to you.